I came to their door with nothing but 2 suitcases, a broken heart, and the foolish hope that family still meant something. But my daughter-in-law saw me as a burden. My own son stood silent while she humiliated me at their dinner table. And just like that, I was out, thrown into the cold, no place to go, no one to call. But life has a strange way of revealing who you really are when you're at your lowest. Because when I opened an old letter from my late husband, I discovered a secret, a fortune. $20 million, mine. They thought I was finished, but instead I bought the very building they lived in, raised their rent, watched their lives unravel from behind a curtain of silence. This isn't just a story of betrayal. This is the reckoning. Before we begin, if stories like this speak to something inside you, the quiet strength, the long-forgotten pain, or the fire to reclaim what was taken, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because every week we share stories of women who were underestimated until they rewrote the ending. Now let me take you back to a small house in rural Texas, where a woman named Clara was about to lose everything and find out just how powerful she truly was. There's a silence in the country that doesn't feel like peace. It hums under your skin like the echo of footsteps that never quite reach the porch. I had lived in that house for 38 years, a weathered, creaking farmhouse nestled just outside Abilene, Texas. It wasn't much to look at from the road, just a 2-story frame hugged by fields that turned gold in the summer and rust in the fall. But it was ours, mine and Henry's. We built it with more grit than money, one beam and one prayer at a time. It was where we raised our only son, Michael, where Henry taught him how to fish in the nearby creek, where I used to hum Patsy Cline in the kitchen while baking cornbread in a skillet older than the marriage itself. When Henry passed away, the sound left the house with him. It happened slow, as these things often do. A cough, a misdiagnosis, then a word that hits like a bullet: cancer. They said it had already spread. I remember nodding while they talked, but none of it sank in. I just kept looking at Henry's hands, the same hands that had once carried me over the threshold of our home. He was gone in 6 months. The funeral was simple. Closed casket. Family came from all over, but grief is a strange thing. It makes people say kind things with empty eyes. When they all left, I found myself alone with a fridge full of uneaten casserole and a stack of sympathy cards that all said the same thing: call if you need anything. I never called. I don't think I knew what to say. The days afterward blurred together. Feed the chickens, sweep the porch, answer no one. At night, the wind would howl through the wheat fields and whistle against the windows. I'd lie awake and stare at the spot where Henry used to sleep, and sometimes I'd talk to him like he was still there. Just soft murmurs, mostly questions I didn't want answers to. I thought of Michael often. He had moved to Austin years ago for college and never came back for more than a long weekend. He had married a city girl named Ellie, polite, thin, always smelling of lavender and judgment. She wasn't mean exactly, just sharp. Every word of hers felt like it came with a blade tucked behind it. Still, Michael was my boy, my only family left. And in the quiet hours, I let myself imagine what it would be like to be near him again, to hear footsteps in the house, to cook dinner for someone other than myself, maybe even help out around the home, take care of things while they worked. I wasn't useless. My bones ached, sure, but my spirit was intact. And most of all, I missed feeling needed. I used to sit on the porch with a cup of weak coffee and stare out over the fields, imagining the future, me holding a grandbaby Michael telling stories, Ellie smiling. I pictured laughter coming from the kitchen again, the kind that echoes, that makes a place feel alive. That was the first time I wrote the letter, just a small note to Michael. I didn't say much, just that I was thinking of him, that the house felt too quiet without his father, that I might consider visiting for a while if it wouldn't be a burden. He called me that same evening. His voice cracked a little when he said, "Of course, Mom. You don't even have to ask." And I didn't. Not after that. I hung up the phone and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not the loud, dramatic kind of crying. Just the kind where tears slip down your cheeks without permission, quiet and stubborn. For the first time in months, I felt something warm begin to bloom in my chest. Hope. It wasn't loud. It wasn't certain. But it was there. And that night, when I turned off the lights and climbed into the bed I once shared with Henry, I whispered aloud to the empty room, "I'm going to be with our son now. I'll be okay." But Henry didn't answer. Only the wind. I spent the next 3 weeks moving through the house like a ghost. It's a strange thing packing up your life. Every drawer you open is a memory waiting to ambush you. An old receipt tucked behind a photo frame. A faded birthday card with your husband's scrawl. The chipped mug with "World's Best Mom" printed on it. Michael had given it to me when he was 8. I held it to my chest and cried like I hadn't in months. I wasn't just boxing up belongings. I was boxing up decades of love, of fights, of ordinary Tuesday mornings and Christmases where the lights never quite worked right. It felt like betrayal, like I was saying goodbye to the only version of myself I truly knew. Clara Thompson, the wife, the homemaker, the mother. The real estate agent was kind, efficient, but her eyes darted around the place like she couldn't wait to be somewhere newer, brighter, less haunted. "It has potential," she had said, forcing a smile. Potential, that's the word people use when they don't want to say old. I didn't haggle on price. I just wanted it done. The day the for sale sign went up, I stood on the porch and ran my fingers along the rail Henry had built by hand. The wood was splintered but solid, like him, like we had been once. I whispered a small apology into the breeze, for leaving, for surviving, for trying to move forward when every part of me wanted to stay in the past. Neighbors stopped by in waves, offering casseroles and polite condolences like they were late to the wake. Mrs. Radley from down the lane brought lemon bars and told me she was jealous. Jealous I was getting out. I smiled and said thank you, but inside I wanted to scream I didn't win anything. I'm not escaping. I'm just alone. I sold the house in 10 days. It barely felt real. The morning I left, I stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases, one packed with clothes, the other filled with photos, letters, and the few kitchen things I couldn't part with. The mug, the rolling pin, a blanket Henry used to nap under during Sunday football. The walls looked bare, like the soul had been vacuumed out. Before I stepped outside, I took one last walk through the house. I touched each wall like it might remember me. The bedroom where Michael was born. The hallway where Henry and I danced once just because. The kitchen, oh the kitchen where I had spent most of my life, feeding people I loved, scrubbing counters, singing to myself when no one was watching. I stood by the back door and whispered goodbye to the garden. The tomatoes had started to sprout. I almost stayed for one more season. But hope doesn't bloom in soil that's already been abandoned. I left the key under the mat. I don't know why. Just in case. The bus ride to Austin took nearly 5 hours. I sat by the window watching the Texas countryside peel away mile by mile. Golden fields gave way to gas stations, then subdivisions, then tall gray buildings that looked like they were built to forget. I clutched my purse tightly the whole time, like someone might try to steal my memories. When we pulled into the station, Michael was waiting. He looked tired, but happy to see me. He gave me a quick hug, not the kind that says, "I've missed you," but the kind that says, "I'm glad you made it in one piece." I didn't mind. I took what I could get. "We'll take the train from here," he said, grabbing my bags. "Ellie's making dinner." I nodded, smiled, followed. I didn't want to be a burden. I was just grateful. Grateful, I kept repeating to myself like a prayer. As we rode the city train toward their neighborhood, I watched the world blur past. People with earbuds, dogs in strollers, billboards for things I'd never heard of. It felt like I was arriving in someone else's life, not just another city. I reached into my coat pocket and found a folded photo of Henry. I had tucked it there the morning I left. His smile was faded, but still strong. "We're here," Michael said, standing up. I put the photo back. I followed my son out into a world I no longer recognized, praying to a man who could no longer answer. The apartment smelled like lavender and takeout. It was one of those new units in a cookie-cutter complex, all gray floors and white cabinets, like someone had designed it to be sterile and modern. Not a single photo on the walls. No clutter. No life. Just a scented candle burning near the sink and a large flat screen flashing muted headlines across a white wall. "Your room's back here," Michael said. I followed him down a narrow hallway. The room was small, neat. A twin bed pushed against the wall, a lamp with no bulb, and a closet that still had a few empty hangers left behind from the last guest. There was a window, though, and when I opened it, I could see a strip of sky between two buildings. That would be enough, I told myself. Michael placed my bags down gently. "It's not much, but it's quiet. Ellie wanted to get you new sheets." That was the first time I heard her name that day. Ellie. She appeared in the doorway a minute later, slender, polished, wrapped in a silk robe, and holding a glass of lemon water like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. Her eyes flicked over me, cool and unreadable. "Hi, Clara," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Hope the trip wasn't too hard." I smiled. "Not at all. The train was lovely." She nodded. "I made a salad for dinner. We eat kind of light around here." "Oh, of course," I said, though I hadn't eaten since sunrise. "Whatever works for you." She turned away before I finished the sentence. Dinner was quiet. We sat at their sleek marble island instead of a dining table. Ellie picked at a pile of greens while Michael scrolled through his phone. I chewed slowly, trying not to make noise with my fork. When I reached for the breadbasket, Ellie's voice cut through the silence. "We don't usually eat carbs at night." I froze mid-reach. "Oh, I didn't mean..." "It's fine," she said too quickly. "Just letting you know." Michael didn't look up. Afterward, I offered to do the dishes. Ellie paused for a beat, then said, "We have a dishwasher." She tapped it like it was a pet. "It's very sensitive, though. Try not to overload it." That night, I lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to find patterns in the shadows. I could hear them laughing faintly from the living room, the way couples do when they're sharing a joke that doesn't belong to you. I turned to face the wall and tucked the blanket tighter around me. It's just the first night, I told myself. Things take time. But time didn't soften anything. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee. Real coffee, not the pod kind. I used the French press I'd brought from home and set out 3 mugs, hoping to start the day on a warm note. But when Ellie walked in, she blinked like I'd rearranged the furniture. "We usually do green smoothies," she said, eyeing the mugs. "But thanks." She didn't drink any. Michael took a sip, said it was good, and left 5 minutes later for work. That became the rhythm. Michael worked. Ellie worked from home, sort of. I never saw her take a call or sit at a desk. Mostly she wandered from room to room, phone in hand, whispering, scrolling, occasionally typing furiously on her laptop. When I asked how things were going, she'd answer with vague words like engagements or brand partnerships. I spent most days in my little room trying to stay out of the way. I folded laundry, cleaned the bathroom, ran errands when asked. I even tried baking something I used to love. Banana bread cornbread, my husband's favorite pecan pie. But every time I placed a dish on the counter, Ellie's reaction was lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice." Sometimes she wouldn't even try it. By the second week, the distance had grown teeth. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found Ellie standing in front of the fridge. She didn't hear me come in. Her voice was low, sharp. "No, she's still here. I told you it's complicated. I can't just kick her out. She's his mom." She turned suddenly and our eyes locked. There was a beat of silence. Then, smooth as ever, she smiled. "Hey, Clara. Just ordering groceries." I nodded slowly and left the room. I didn't ask who she was talking to. I didn't need to. After that, it got worse. She stopped leaving food for me. One night, I opened the fridge and found nothing but almond milk and a bag of wilted spinach. When I asked Michael if they were planning to order in, he frowned. "You didn't eat earlier." "No," I said gently. "There wasn't anything." He sighed. "Ellie said she made lunch." I smiled again. Maybe I missed it. The worst came 2 nights later. I was reaching for a pair of earrings in my suitcase when Ellie walked in holding her phone. "Did you take my bracelet?" she asked. "What?" "The gold one. From my grandmother. It's not in my jewelry drawer." My stomach dropped. "No, of course not." She stared at me a moment too long, then turned on her heel. "Okay, just checking." She found it the next day under her gym bag. She didn't apologize. Michael never brought it up. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and held the old wedding photo I kept in my suitcase. Henry's arm around me, the sun lighting up his face. "I think I made a mistake," I whispered. "I think I came to the wrong place." But I didn't cry. Not yet. Because there's a kind of pain that doesn't show itself right away. The slow kind. The kind that builds day by day in the silence between footsteps, in the way your name is spoken like an obligation, not a joy. And I knew somewhere deep in my bones that the worst was still coming. The first few weeks at Michael and Ellie's place felt like tiptoeing through someone else's life. Clara had grown used to waking up with the sound of roosters and the wind rustling through cottonwood trees. Here in the city apartment, mornings were sterile silent, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional clang of pipes. She would wake before anyone else out of habit and sit at the edge of the narrow bed in her small room. One window, one closet, one lamp. But she told herself, "This is enough. This is a new beginning." Each morning, Clara made it her mission to contribute. She folded laundry. She scrubbed the bathroom. She lined the kitchen trash with precision and stacked used mail into neat little piles on the counter. She hoped Ellie would notice the small efforts. But Ellie barely said good morning. Still, Clara tried. She knew the key to any home was the kitchen, so she started cooking. The first time she made cornbread and vegetable soup, simple but hearty, the kind of meal that had warmed her and Michael's bellies during harder winters. She left a handwritten note beside the pot. "Dinner is ready. Just reheat if it gets cold. Love, Mom." That night she found the pot untouched, the soup still full, but a note stuck to the fridge in Ellie's handwriting. "Got takeout, thanks anyway." Clara smiled anyway. Maybe they had a long day. Maybe tomorrow would be different. There were a few golden afternoons, warm, forgiving ones, the kind where the sun cast long shadows across the dining table, and for a few moments, Clara allowed herself to believe she belonged. Michael would be home early, still in his dress shirt, tie loosened. Ellie scrolling on her phone but smiling here and there. And the three of them seated at the same table, eating together. Clara cooked with care on those days. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, buttery rolls. Dishes from her old recipe box, now worn and stained, but filled with memories. She set the table with quiet pride, even folded the napkins into little fans. But soon, she noticed her plate always looked different. Her portion was set aside from the rest. Sometimes cold, sometimes wrapped in foil while the others ate hot servings. Other times the taste was off, too much salt, or strangely bitter. Once her mashed potatoes were so peppery they burned her tongue. She never asked, never confronted. She just pushed the food around her plate and sipped water until it no longer stung. She wanted to believe these were accidents, oversights. She wanted to believe Ellie didn't hate her. But then came the photos. Clara had just finished arranging flowers on the dining table, a small bunch of sunflowers from the corner market. She liked bringing color into the space, something bright, alive. Ellie walked in holding her phone up, framing the table. "Don't move," she chirped. "This looks perfect." Clara straightened up, smiling. Snap, snap, snap. Ellie uploaded the pictures to Instagram within minutes. The captions made Clara pause. "Another sweet night taking care of my amazing mother-in-law. family first. Cooking for this sweet lady tonight. Blessings on blessings. Clara wasn't even in the photos. Just the table, the food, the flowers, the illusion of kindness. That night, Ellie served boxed pasta. Overcooked, bland, clearly made in haste. She handed Clara a bowl with a wooden spoon still inside. Michael wasn't home. Clara sat in silence, eating what she could, the smell of dish soap lingering in the air. Ellie hummed a tune in the kitchen while texting. The TV buzzed in the background, some show Clara didn't recognize, filled with people yelling over each other. The next morning, Clara woke up to her bedsheets missing. She found them in the laundry, soaking wet and balled up. "Sorry," Ellie said when Clara asked. "They smelled kinda musty. I figured I'd just toss them in." But Clara had just washed them 2 days ago. She didn't argue, just waited until Ellie left for work, then hung the sheets to dry on the tiny balcony, clutching the railing with hands that had planted tomatoes, raised animals, buried a husband. In the quiet, she whispered, "It's just a phase. She's stressed. New city, new job. She'll warm up." But somewhere deep down, Clara knew this wasn't about stress. This was about control. She just didn't know how far it would go. The morning began like most others. The soft clink of teacups, a quiet shuffle in the kitchen, the dull hum of the city traffic muffled behind thick apartment walls. Clara had just finished folding Michael's work shirts, a habit she kept from her country days, where every wrinkle in a man's collar felt like a sign of a lazy wife. Even now, though she was neither wife nor servant, she did it anyway. It made her feel useful, anchored, part of something. Michael had already left for work, a peck on the cheek, distracted eyes on his phone. Ellie remained upstairs longer than usual. Clara didn't question it. Maybe the girl was sleeping in. Maybe she needed a slow morning. Lord knew city women had it harder in ways Clara still didn't fully grasp. So she started breakfast, eggs, toast, fresh orange slices, all laid out neatly. Ellie walked into this kitchen around 10. Not a good morning, not even a glance at the table. Her face was stiff, unreadable, her jaw tight like she'd been grinding it all night. She went straight to the drawer near the fridge, pulled it open, then another and another, slamming each one shut harder than the last. Clara stood frozen by the sink. "Something wrong, honey." Ellie turned slowly, her eyes sharp. "My watch," she said flatly. "It's gone." Clara blinked. "Your watch?" "The gold one. Michael's birthday gift last year." Clara tilted her head, trying to recall. Ellie did have a gold watch, thin band, dainty face, always sparkling like it had something to prove. "I haven't seen it," Clara said softly. "Maybe it's—" "Don't," Ellie snapped. "Don't pretend you don't know. You were in our room yesterday. I was just tidying up the laundry basket. I didn't touch your dresser." Ellie folded her arms. Funny, because it was on the dresser. Silence bloomed thick between them. Clara could feel it like a slow leak in a tire. The subtle hiss of air being let out and something beginning to collapse. "You think I took it?" she asked quietly. Not even hurt, just stunned. Ellie shrugged. "All I know is, it was there. Then you were. Now it's not." Clara swallowed hard. "Check the bathroom, the kitchen drawer. Sometimes you take it off while—" "I did," Ellie cut, in her tone rising. "I checked everything. It's not here." Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing else she could say. She had no proof, no defense, just her word. And Ellie wasn't the kind of woman who gave weight to words without receipts. Later that afternoon, Clara overheard Ellie on the phone, not yelling, worse, calm, measured. "No, I don't want to accuse. But we have to be realistic. She's old but not helpless. She grew up poor, right? Sometimes people carry habits. I'm just saying. If it turns up at a pawn shop, you'll know." Clara sat at the edge of the bed, eyes burning, hands folded in her lap so tight, the knuckles turned white. Her ears rang, not from the accusation, but the way it was delivered, casual like a weather update. Humiliation disguised as concern. That night at dinner, Clara served roast chicken and green beans. No one spoke. Michael scrolled through his phone. Ellie barely touched her plate. When Michael finally looked up, his words were quiet, like he was stepping around landmines. Mom, Ellie's missing something valuable. A watch. You didn't, maybe accidentally, pick it up. Clara felt her fork tremble. No, Michael. He nodded slowly. Just checking. No defense. No, of course she didn't. No, don't be ridiculous. Just checking. That was the first crack. Not the accusation, not the silence, but the absence of belief. It was small, almost invisible, but Clara felt it. A tiny hairline fracture running through the center of her son's trust. And it would only grow from there. The next incident came quietly, but left a scar Clara wouldn't forget. It was a Saturday morning. Clara had woken up early as always and headed into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. She made buttermilk pancakes, Michael's favorite since he was 12, and even brewed Ellie's fancy vanilla chai tea, the one she liked to show off on her Instagram stories. She laid everything out on the table, wiped down the counters, and waited. Michael stumbled in first, rubbing his eyes and giving his mother a sleepy smile. "Smells amazing, Mom," he said. He kissed her on the cheek and sat down. But Ellie... She walked in 10 minutes later, hair still wrapped in a silk scarf, holding her phone like it was a baby. She took one look at the food, then at Clara, and froze. "Did you use the almond flour?" Ellie asked, her voice unusually sharp. Clara blinked. "No, sweetheart. I used the one in the blue bag." Ellie slammed her phone on the counter. "That was the almond flour. I told you I'm allergic to gluten. You're trying to kill me." Michael looked up startled. Ellie calmed down. "No," Ellie barked. "This is the third time. First, it was the salad with croutons, then the chicken broth with MSG, and now this." Clara felt her hands shake. I didn't mean to. I thought..." "That's the problem," Ellie spat. "You thought. You think you know better than me. But maybe you're just too old to follow simple instructions." Michael looked torn. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ellie's eyes welled with tears. "I'm pregnant, Michael," she whispered. "I'm carrying our baby, and your mother keeps endangering us. Do you want to wait until I wind up in the hospital before you take this seriously?" That was when something shifted. Clara felt it. The room went colder. Michael didn't yell. He didn't even speak. He just put down his fork and pushed the plate away. The second incident was uglier. Ellie had posted a story on her social media that morning, a cheerful video of Clara smiling beside her holding a pie they'd baked together. The caption read, "Teaching my sweet Mill how to bake the old-fashioned way, #bonding, #blessed." It was all fake. The truth was, Clara had baked the pie alone while Ellie sat in the living room watching reality shows and texting. She only entered the kitchen when the timer went off, threw on an apron, and asked Clara to stand next to her for just one quick pic. That pic became the polished lie that hundreds of followers clicked like on. But the followers didn't see what happened hours later. That evening, Ellie hosted a small dinner for a few girlfriends, loud, glamorous women in high heels and full makeup. Clara had tried to stay invisible, holed up in her room. But halfway through the evening, Ellie knocked. "We're short on wine glasses," she said. "Could you bring them from the shelf?" Clara nodded, eager to help. She carried in 4 glasses on a tray. Just as she stepped into the dining room, one of Ellie's friends gasped. "Oop, careful, honey." Clara stumbled. Someone had left a large decorative pillow, one of Ellie's, right in the hallway. Clara didn't fall, but the tray wobbled and a glass tipped, hitting the floor. It didn't break, but Ellie stood furious. "Oh my God, Clara. Are you drunk?" she snapped. "You could have broken that. You're lucky it was just a scratch." Clara's face burned with shame. "I didn't see the..." "She's always doing this," Ellie said to her friends, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I love her, but she's just not careful anymore." That night, Clara cried in her room, not because of the glass, but because one of Ellie's friends on her way out had leaned close and whispered, "She treats you like help, not family." The third incident was the crack that let all the cold pour in. It started with a missing watch. Michael's favorite watch, a vintage Rolex that Clara and her late husband had gifted him when he graduated college, was suddenly gone. He searched everywhere. The bedroom, the bathroom, even the laundry. Nothing. Clara offered to help. "Are you sure it's not in your office?" she asked gently. "I remember you sometimes take it off when you work on your laptop." Michael rubbed his temples. I looked. Ellie looked too. Clara didn't say anything. She just returned to the kitchen. The next morning, as she was folding laundry, Ellie stormed in. "You really have some nerve." Clara turned startled. "What?" Ellie pulled something from her pocket. "The watch. It was in your room," she hissed. "Under your socks." "Care to explain?" Clara's mouth opened, then closed. "That's not possible. You took it," Ellie said, her voice rising. "You're sick. Sick or desperate. Either way, you don't belong here." Clara looked to Michael, who had followed Ellie in pale and wide-eyed. "Michael, I didn't." He didn't yell. He just looked away. That was worse. The day Ellie announced she was pregnant, Clara felt something stir inside her chest, something almost like hope. For a brief moment, she thought maybe this child, this grandchild, might be the thread to pull the family closer together. She smiled genuinely and reached for Ellie's hand across the dinner table. But Ellie flinched, pulled away gently but deliberately. Michael didn't notice. He was already scrolling on his phone, a habit he'd picked up again lately, as if retreating from the very house he lived in. The next few weeks, Clara tried to be more helpful. She offered to cook Ellie's favorite meals, made ginger tea every morning, bought prenatal vitamins with her own money. But Ellie never touched the tea. The food was left cold on the counter, and the vitamins, Clara once found them unopened, stuffed behind cereal boxes. Then came the whispers. Clara would walk into a room and hear hushed voices behind a door. Michael's voice low and uncertain. Ellie's teary and pleading. "I'm trying," she would sob. "But your mom. It's like she's suffocating me. I can't even rest without her judging eyes." Clara said nothing. One night, Michael came home unusually late. His face was tired, jaw tight, as he leaned in the doorway of Clara's small guest room. "Mom," he said quietly, "can you give Ellie a bit more space? She's not been feeling well lately." "I only ask how she's doing," Clara replied, confused. "I make tea." I know he interrupted, but sometimes trying too hard feels like pressure. Clara's stomach turned. Pressure. That's what she was now. A week later, the accusation started. It began with a missing watch Michael's. He'd left it on the kitchen counter. 2 hours later, it was gone. Clara had just finished doing dishes. Ellie was curled up on the couch with her phone. When Michael asked about it, Ellie didn't say a word at first. She just looked over at Clara, then looked away. That was all it took. Michael approached his mother cautiously, awkwardly. "Did you maybe move it while you were cleaning? Maybe forgot where you put it?" Clara was stunned. "Of course not. I wouldn't touch your things, Michael." Ellie offered a shrug, still not looking up from her phone. "It's probably nothing. Maybe it just slipped somewhere. But, you know, pregnancy brain makes me notice everything." The watch was later found under the couch cushion where Michael himself often napped. No one apologized. Then a week later, Ellie slipped on the stairs. It wasn't a dramatic fall, just a stumble, a surprised yelp, and a thud as she caught herself on the banister. But she screamed anyway. And when Michael rushed out of the bedroom, Ellie was sitting at the foot of the stairs, cradling her belly wide-eyed. "She pushed me," Ellie gasped, pointing up. Clara was still at the top of the stairs, holding a basket of laundry. What Clara whispered, a breath caught in her throat. "I didn't even touch you. I was just..." She brushed past me. "I lost my balance," Ellie insisted. Her voice trembled just enough to sound honest, even though her eyes were cold steel behind the tears. Michael rushed to her side. "Jesus, Mom." What were you thinking? She's pregnant. She was standing alone. Clara's voice cracked. I never touched her. Michael didn't say anything. He just helped Ellie up and walked her to the couch. That night, he didn't speak a word to his mother. And Clara ate alone in the kitchen, her spoon clinking against an empty bowl of cold soup. The next morning, Clara found something unusual in the kitchen. A small plastic device blinking red taped under the spice rack. A hidden camera. She stared at it in disbelief. Later that night, Ellie posted a video to a private Facebook group. Clara saw it by accident, using an old account she hadn't touched in years. The video was heavily edited. No audio, just Clara in the kitchen turning sharply, gesturing. At one point, she slammed a drawer, the only moment the video zoomed in. The caption read, "Trying to care for my unborn child while living under the same roof as someone who hates me. Please send prayers." The comments were immediate. Kick her out, girl. She's jealous. Old women are toxic like that. OMG, this is abuse. Clara sat back in her chair staring at the screen. Her hands were trembling. Her face burned not with anger, but with shame. And it only got worse. The living room became off-limits. Clara was told not to use the TV, not to open the fridge after 8 p.m. Her laundry was accidentally left in the rain. Her soap was replaced with dish detergent. Her room, once small but quiet, now felt like a cage. Michael noticed none of it, or perhaps he chose not to. He was too focused on his job, on Ellie's pregnancy, on the child that was everything now. The way he looked at Clara changed. He didn't smile as much. He didn't ask how she was sleeping. His hugs became brief, like checking a box. And still Clara stayed. Because mothers don't leave, right? They endure. Until one night, the power in her room went out. The rest of the house was fine. Just her room, dark, suffocating, like a warning. Clara sat in that darkness for hours, listening to the laughter coming from the living room. Michael, Ellie, the warmth she used to belong to, now sealed behind a door she wasn't welcome through. That night, she cried without a sound, lips pressed into the pillow so tightly they went numb. And that was the first time she whispered it aloud. I don't think I can stay. But she still did. For now. There's a particular kind of silence that follows betrayal. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't weep. It just sits heavy and cold like wet wool clinging to your skin. That was the silence Clara sat in the night before it all exploded. For months now, she'd been walking on the thinnest of ice inside her own son's home, careful not to raise her voice, to clean up after herself, to ask for as little as possible. She had even stopped cooking after Ellie mocked her meatloaf in front of a dinner guest as something out of a wartime ration box. Clara smiled through it. She always did. But there had been tension in the air lately, sharper, more deliberate. Ellie was colder, calculated. And Michael, though still kind in the tone of his voice, had grown more distant. He rarely looked Clara in the eye anymore. And when he did, it was with the kind of politeness reserved for a stranger, not a mother. Then came the announcement Ellie was pregnant. Clara had smiled truly. Despite everything, a grandchild was still something sacred. She imagined sewing baby blankets like she did for Michael, maybe even being allowed to hold this child if things softened. But Ellie had other plans. The day after they shared the news, Clara came down to the kitchen to find her breakfast plate already on the counter. It was cold. A single boiled egg and a slice of dry toast. Ellie walked in behind her, smiling too wide. "Doctor says I need peace," she said, rubbing her belly. "No stress, no tension." Clara nodded. "Of course, whatever you need." Ellie paused. "Then you understand we'll need some boundaries." It was the start of something. Clara didn't know it then, but Ellie was setting the stage. Days later, Ellie screamed from the bathroom. Clara ran panicked, thinking the worst. Ellie was sitting on the floor, shaking. A shattered mirror lay nearby. "She pushed me," Ellie sobbed when Michael ran in. "I was trying to clean the shelf. She just walked in and shoved me." Clara stood stunned. "I didn't touch her." Ellie gripped her belly, gasping for breath. The baby. I think something's wrong. Michael's face went pale. He didn't even look at Clara. He picked Ellie up and rushed her out the door. Clara sat down in the hallway shaking. When they returned from the hospital hours later, Ellie went straight to the bedroom. Michael approached Clara slowly. "They said the baby's okay," he said quietly. "That's good," Clara whispered. He didn't smile. He just stared at her, then asked, "Why would you do that?" "I didn't." He looked away. "You need to be more careful." More careful. The words felt like a nail being hammered through her spine. The following week was a quiet war zone. Ellie cried often strategically loud when Michael was home, hushed and cold when Clara was around. Her voice would tremble, saying things like, "I just don't feel safe," or "She watches me, Michael. I feel threatened." One night, Clara woke to find all her toiletries removed from the bathroom. Her toothbrush was gone. Her robe was missing from the back of the door. Instead, a note taped to her door. "Please use the downstairs guest bathroom. Hygiene is critical during pregnancy. Thanks." Even that Clara endured. Until the morning she was accused of stealing. It started with a watch. Not a fancy one, not a Rolex or something you'd insure. Just a silver fossil watch Ellie had received from her sister, the kind you might find at a mall kiosk. But it was missing. "I had it on the nightstand," Ellie said, arms crossed, lips tight. "Now it's gone." Clara blinked. "Are you sure? Maybe it fell?" Michael stood between them stiff. We looked. "It's not anywhere in the room." "I haven't been in your bedroom," Clara said gently. Ellie snorted. "Right. You just happened to pass through and accidentally pick up my watch. I said I didn't take it." "Well, maybe it's with the silverware that keeps disappearing." Michael winced. Clara's breath caught. "You think I'm stealing spoons now?" "Look, I don't want to argue," Ellie said, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm just saying things started going missing after you moved in. I've lived here for 10 months. And we've been patient," Ellie said, stepping closer. "But with the baby coming, maybe this just isn't working anymore." Clara looked at Michael silently, pleading. He looked at Ellie. "I think we need some space," he said, "at least for now." And just like that, it was decided. Not a conversation. Not a discussion. A verdict. She had one weekend to pack. Ellie had even prepared boxes neatly labeled as if it were just another chore. Clara's room was stripped bare by Sunday morning. Her plants, which had once sat on the windowsill catching the morning sun, were left by the trash bins. Michael helped her carry the suitcases down. 2 of them, one with clothes, the other with photo albums, a jewelry box, and a folded American flag, the one from Harold's funeral. Ellie didn't say goodbye. She stood at the window, rubbing her stomach, watching like a queen, surveying a problem that had finally been handled. Michael kissed Clara's cheek at the curb. "Let me know where you end up," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "You really believe I did all that?" He hesitated. "I don't know what to believe anymore." And with that, he turned back toward the house. The door closed behind him. And Clara stood there, 63 years old, with nothing but 2 suitcases and a hollowed-out chest on the sidewalk of a city she didn't understand, trying to swallow the sting of being exiled from her own blood. But what no one knew, not Michael, not Ellie, not even Clara herself, was that her story was far from over. Because in the bottom of that second suitcase, tucked behind the family photos and beneath the flag, was a letter. One Harold had asked her never to open unless she was alone, completely alone. She didn't open it that day, but she would soon. And when she did, everything would change. The motel smelled like bleach and cigarettes. Clara sat on the edge of the too-soft bed, staring at the worn carpet, her fingers still wrapped around the suitcase handle as if letting go meant admitting this was real. That she, a 63-year-old widow, had been cast out like a forgotten garment, too old, too inconvenient, too unloved. The clock ticked loudly on the nightstand. The heater rattled with every gust. Somewhere in the room next door, a child was crying. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Not when Michael kissed her cheek. Not when the cab driver asked "rough day" and she smiled back. not even when the door to the room clicked shut behind her and the silence finally caught up. But now, with no one watching, the tears came fast. Not loud, not messy, just a slow, steady leak of everything she'd held inside since the day Harold died. Every slight, every insult, every time Ellie pushed her buttons and Michael looked away. She sat there for hours staring at the corner of the room like it might offer her some kind of answer. But all she had was a letter. It had been years since Harold gave it to her. A plain white envelope yellowed at the edges with her name written in his precise military-style script, Clara Ann Watkins. On the back, only one instruction in his voice etched into her memory as clearly as the morning he'd handed it to her. Open this when you feel like you've lost everything. She had placed it at the very bottom of the suitcase beneath layers of grief and obligation. Now finally she understood why. With trembling hands, Clara slid her finger under the seal. The paper was thick, expensive, like everything Harold touched measured thoughtful. The letter read,
My Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know you, you're not just mourning, you're holding everyone else together. You were always better at that than me. But I also know you're alone now. And I know deep in my bones that someday Michael will forget everything you did for him. That some woman will whisper poison in his ear and he'll believe her because it's easier to believe lies than face the truth that love takes work. You'll think it's your fault. You'll wonder if you failed as a mother. You didn't. You never did. I want you to know something I never told anyone, not even Michael. After the army, I worked with Titan Energy for over 2 decades. My last few projects, they weren't just profitable, they were gold mines. And when we sold the South Texas reserves, I negotiated a cut. Quietly, off the books, legal but untraceable unless someone knew where to look. I put it in a trust, under your name, not Michael's, not anyone else's, yours. $20 million. I know what you're thinking, that it should have gone to him. But Clara, he has time to figure things out, you don't. And you gave up everything to be a wife and mother. It's your turn now. The key is with Mr. Lowenstein, our lawyer in Austin. He has the documents, he knows what to do. Don't be afraid to use it. And don't let anyone make you feel like you're worth less than you are. You were the strongest woman I ever knew. I hope this gives you a chance to remember that. All my love, Harold.
Clara stared at the letter, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. $20 million. She read the line again. Not Michael's, not anyone else's, hers. She didn't smile. Not at first. The weight of the betrayal still sat heavy on her chest. But slowly, very slowly, her breath began to deepen. The woman they kicked out, she wasn't some fragile, helpless relic of a forgotten time. She was the widow of a man who had built an empire in silence, and now she carried his legacy. Clara folded the letter gently, held it to her chest, and let out a long, slow breath. Tomorrow she would call Mr. Lowenstein. But tonight, for the first time in months, she would sleep not as a burden, but as the quiet storm no one saw coming. There was no grand announcement, no firework moment, just the click of a hotel door closing behind her and the cold silence of an empty room. That's how Clara's second life began. 2 suitcases, 1 phone still off, and a bank account holding just over $20.6 million wired from a trust her late husband had quietly arranged years ago before cancer hollowed out his body, but not his love. She didn't cry. Not this time. Not like the nights she sobbed into her pillow in her son's guest room, pretending her silence was a favor. This time she just sat. Back straight, fingers calm, and eyes set forward. There was no one to save her, no one to impress, and for the first time, no one to betray her. The condo she rented was nothing like the cozy, worn-down house back in rural Texas. It was sleek, high-rise, impersonal, exactly what she needed. It came with underground parking, a concierge who didn't ask questions, and a balcony overlooking the city lights. She paid in full 6 months up front under the newly created Eleanor Foundation named after her mother. It was a shell company, silent, clean, private. The world would never know Clara Dawson lived here. She didn't buy jewelry. She didn't throw parties. Her wardrobe didn't suddenly turn designer. She bought 2 blouses, a tailored pair of black pants, and 1 leather-bound notebook. In it, she wrote 3 rules. No one will ever control me again. Money is not power. Knowledge is. Silence is my strength until the moment I choose to speak. The first year passed like molasses slow dark, sticky with grief. She watched YouTube videos on corporate law, took beginner online classes in accounting and real estate. She read books about property trusts, LLCs, silent partnerships, zoning permits, and tax loopholes. At night, she'd listen to podcasts with titles like Outsmarting the System and Wealth Without Exposure. Her brain, tired at first, began to hunger again. It was like a muscle that had atrophied in the quiet corridors of motherhood. But now it flexed, it fought. It learned how to protect. Clara never wanted revenge, at least not at first. What she wanted was never to be at someone's mercy again. She studied quietly, rarely left the apartment, and made one rule for herself she never broke, never looked back. But back in Austin, chaos festered. Ellie, emboldened by Clara's absence, settled comfortably into her new life. She had full control of the home, the narrative, and Michael. Or so she thought. The money Clara used to quietly cover groceries, repairs, and surprise bills gone. Ellie now had to handle the budget, but she didn't budget. She spent. On spa packages, overpriced organic foods, she never cooked luxury maternity clothes. And Michael, worn thin from long hours and rising mortgage payments, started noticing. The cracks came slowly. A receipt for a prenatal massage that cost over $800. A gym bag that didn't belong to him found in the trunk. A suspicious number of late-night yoga classes that didn't match any schedule online. And then the baby came. A boy, healthy, loud lungs, but with jet black hair and skin 2 shades darker than either parent's. Michael held him with trembling arms, smiling through the confusion. Maybe he looked like a distant relative. Maybe, but the doubts were seeds. And Ellie, as usual, was unbothered until Michael started asking questions. Meanwhile, Clara wasn't watching. Not yet. She had other things to tend to. Her first investment was modest, a duplex in a transitional neighborhood. She bought it cash, renovated it using a small firm she vetted for weeks, rented it to a young mother and a retired veteran, both background checked and personally interviewed. She wanted to offer stability because she knew what instability felt like. Within 2 years, she owned 4 properties, each under separate LLCs, each with clean records and strong managers. She still lived modestly. 1 bedroom, 1 desk, 1 framed photo of her and her husband from 1984. His hand on her shoulder, his smile faint but proud. She looked at it every morning before reviewing her portfolio. By the 3rd year, Clara had earned a silent reputation in the local real estate scene, not as a shark, but as a ghost. Offers came through faceless emails. She negotiated in cash. Her lawyer spoke for her in meetings. Her name was never on paper, only her initials in private files. She had meetings in coffee shops, never in the same place twice. Her hair, once left to gray without thought, was now trimmed into a sharp bob dyed a warm chestnut. Her shoes always flat, her expression unreadable. But inside her, something had started to burn again. Not anger, not pride, power. One night, Clara sat by her condo window sipping green tea, watching the lights blink across the skyline. Her phone buzzed. It was from an old contact, a quiet woman who handled small real estate auctions. A property had just hit the distress list. An apartment complex in East Austin, slightly neglected, underperforming, held by a flailing family trust. Clara scrolled through the listing, then stopped. Unit 4C, Michael and Ellie's address. Her hand didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. She simply smiled and whispered, "Let's see how she likes the taste of fear." She picked up her pen, turned to a new page in her notebook, and wrote, Phase 2 begin. The auction was quiet. No fuss, no headlines. It was held on a foggy Tuesday morning, tucked away in a modest municipal building just off I-35. Clara arrived early, dressed in a tan wool coat, a silk scarf tucked under her collar. Her boots clicked softly on the linoleum floors as she walked with calm certainty, documents neatly filed in a black leather folder. Her bidding representative, a discreet lawyer from San Antonio, stood beside her, nodding once before entering the room. Ellie and Michael had no idea the building was being sold. Their lease was still under automatic renewal. They received their maintenance updates, paid their rent barely, and went on with their lives thinking they were secure. But as the auctioneer read out the opening price, Clara already knew what would happen. She had pre-qualified, fronted the deposit, and submitted the winning offer in full through ML Ventures, a subsidiary of the Eleanor Foundation. It was all airtight. The apartment building was hers. The home they kicked her out of. The roof under which her son let her starve. She now owned every square inch of it. She didn't visit the building that day. Instead, she drove to her favorite Vietnamese cafe, ordered a bowl of hot pho, and sat quietly by the window while watching the rain slide down the glass. The smell of broth, the low hum of city traffic, it all felt like a hymn to her rebirth. When the ownership transfer was officially recorded a week later, she didn't call Michael. She didn't text Ellie. She didn't do anything visible. Because real power isn't loud. It moves in silence. She hired a new property manager, someone detail-oriented, discreet, and absolutely loyal. They reviewed every tenant file, every missed payment, every ignored maintenance report. And when they reached Unit 4C, the notes were damning. 2 months behind on utilities, complaints of shouting, repeatedly ignored inspection notices, and a curious influx of different men visiting during daytime hours when Michael was at work. Clara didn't react. She instructed the manager to begin gradual upgrades to the building: new paint in the hallways, repaired stairwells, upgraded lighting, all subtle, all funded by her. And then came the letters. Every tenant received one, a friendly notice of adjusted rent brought up to match the current market. Most increases were reasonable, except for one. Unit 4C tripled, backdated fees included, late payment penalties enforced. Clara signed the letter with a single flourish: ML Holdings. The reaction came within days. Her manager forwarded a furious voicemail left by Chad, Ellie's gym trainer boyfriend, now confirmed live-in. Michael still worked long hours, but from what Clara gathered, he was barely present anymore. The baby, now a toddler, didn't look like him. And even if he suspected he hadn't acted yet, Chad's message was half yelled, half mumbled. Words like extortion, illegal, and scam were thrown in. He demanded the name of the new owner. He wanted to talk to the person behind this madness. Clara listened to the voicemail 3 times, then deleted it. That week, Amanda's life, or what was left of it, began to crumble. Not all at once. Clara had no desire for chaos, just clarity. The building's security system was upgraded. New cameras installed, particularly outside Unit 4C. Notices were posted for stricter trash regulations, noise limitations, and maintenance access. A surprise inspection was scheduled. When the manager entered 4C, he documented peeling paint mold in the bathroom, broken cabinet hinges, a door off its hinges. Michael had stopped maintaining anything. Ellie, ever the performer, tried to play hostess, offering bottled water, faking smiles, but the manager saw through it. Clara made sure every detail went on file. She started visiting the neighborhood weekly, never at the same time, always unnoticed. Dressed like a retiree in oversized sunglasses and a book under her arm, she'd walk past the building, slowly glancing up at the unit that once held her prisoner. Once she saw Ellie slam the door in Michael's face, baby on her hip, phone in the other hand. The man she once tricked into kicking his mother out, now a ghost in his own home. Clara sat in her car that night with the windows cracked, listening to an old Dolly Parton CD. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just took a deep breath, the kind you take before diving deeper. 2 weeks later, a neighbor filed a formal complaint. Yelling, glass shattering, a child screaming. Clara authorized a wellness check. The manager, accompanied by security, knocked for 5 minutes. No answer. Just the sound of a man pacing inside. Eventually, Ellie opened the door, eyes red mascara smudged. "It's fine," she muttered. "We're just going through something." No one believed her. But Clara didn't intervene. Not yet. The building's job was to record. Her job was to wait. Back in her high-rise apartment, Clara's life was expanding. She joined a women's investment circle under a different name. She hosted a charity event for single mothers anonymously. She purchased 2 more buildings in Midtown, both needing renovation, both filled with tenants who appreciated a landlord that actually listened. She wasn't chasing vengeance. She was building an empire, one brick at a time, every brick laid with silence, every stone carved with memory. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, only 6 words. "I know who you are now." No name, no signature, but Clara knew. Chad. It was a threat veiled in desperation. He'd found the trail. A leak somewhere. Maybe a paper left on a desk. A whisper in the hallway, a photo misfiled. She wasn't scared. She called her attorney. "We're going to war," she said softly. "But we'll fight it my way." Clara sat in the corner of her penthouse living room, the evening light pouring across the oak floorboards in golden streaks. The letter was still on the coffee table, untouched for hours now, but its presence buzzed in the room like a low hum. "I know who you are now." 6 words. That was it. No signature, no return address. But the handwriting, slanted, angry, careless, was unmistakable. She'd seen it on sticky notes around the old apartment, in passive-aggressive to-do lists Chad used to leave for Michael, in the labels on cold takeout boxes shoved into the back of the fridge. It was him. He knew. Not everything, but enough. Clara could almost picture him pacing in his cheap sneakers across the cracked tile floors of Unit 4C, piecing it together, searching property databases, pulling at every thread. He had finally stumbled onto ML Holdings, and from there found the tax documents, a name he recognized buried in legal filings. Maybe it wasn't her full name, but enough to light the match. He was coming. And Clara? She was ready. The first call went to her lawyer. "Draft the cease and desist. Make it bulletproof. And get me a file on everything Chad Harmon has ever done as a tenant. Every complaint, every missed payment, every email. I want it all." She spent the next week preparing. Not hiding. Not retreating. Just calmly, methodically sharpening every tool she had. Security cameras reviewed and archived. Noise complaints compiled. Tenant testimonies collected, maintenance sabotage logs dated and signed. Then she found something curious: falsified plumbing requests filed under fake names. Chad's attempts to harass the building office anonymously. He'd used a free email with the subject lines like, "Tenant concern and urgent complaint," but his grammar gave him away. The same misspellings, the same erratic tone. Her legal team traced the IP addresses. One of them matched the Wi-Fi in Unit 4C. Bingo. That same week, Amanda called. Not Michael, not Ellie. Amanda. The voice on the other end of the line was smaller than Clara remembered. It shook like someone learning to speak again after years of silence. "Mom, he's losing it." Clara didn't speak, just listened. "He found some paperwork in my email from when I searched ML Holdings. I didn't tell him, I swear. But he pieced it together. He thinks you're behind everything. He thinks you're targeting us." Clara inhaled slowly. "And what do you think?" she asked. There was a pause, the kind that holds the weight of years. "I think we did something unforgivable. And you survived it." That was enough. The cease and desist arrived at Chad's doorstep 3 days later via certified mail. Clara didn't include a letterhead or signature, just cold, formal legal language. "Your attempts to harass, defame, and threaten a registered property owner are being documented. Any further contact will be grounds for civil action. Surveillance footage, digital correspondence, and tenant statements have been secured and submitted. You are advised to retain legal counsel." Inside the envelope, she also included a photo. An old one. It was from her first week in that apartment. Clara sitting on the patio quietly watering a pot of succulents Ellie had given her. A rare staged gesture of kindness. The photo had once been posted to Ellie's Instagram with the caption, "Taking care of family. Always." Now it was printed and sent back. A mirror, a reminder. You forgot who I was. But I never forgot what you did. Then came the fallout. Chad went online. Of course he did. A string of vague, furious posts. Landlords are evil. You think you know someone until they screw you in silence. Power doesn't make you right. It just makes you louder. No names, no details. But they were enough to stir rumors. Clara's legal team drafted a second warning, one more step, and a defamation suit would follow. And then radio silence. Not even a whisper. Clara returned to her routine. Yoga at sunrise. Investment calls by noon. Dinners on the rooftop patio. She had learned something powerful in those months. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to hold the truth. And she held every piece of it. Meanwhile, back at the building, Ellie was unraveling. Tenants complained of her stomping through the halls, screaming at the toddler slamming doors. The property manager submitted a maintenance photo, a dent in the front door like someone had punched it from the inside. Ellie's social media presence faded. The curated posts of happy motherhood vanished. The brand sponsorships she'd once bragged about were nowhere to be found. No more photo shoots, no more hashtags about gratitude, just digital dust. And one evening, Clara's manager forwarded her a new tenant complaint, crying constant pitiful crying from the unit above. Not the baby's, a woman's. Michael, to his credit, had started to notice. It began with the bills, then the baby's features, then the late-night texts Ellie tried to hide. He confronted her. She deflected. He asked for a paternity test. She screamed. The breaking point came when Michael caught Chad shirtless inside the apartment when he arrived home early from work. Ellie claimed he was helping with groceries. Michael packed a bag that night. Clara watched it unfold like a slow-motion collapse. She didn't rush in. She didn't interfere. She just waited and documented. Ellie was left alone with a child not biologically her husband's, a collapsing reputation, an empty apartment, and rent she could no longer afford. From queen bee to eviction notice. And all of it without Clara saying a single word. By late fall, the building was thriving. Vacancies filled. Rent stable. Upgrades completed. And Unit 4C empty. Ellie disappeared one night, leaving behind a trail of debt and a toddler in the custody of her parents out in West Texas. Clara had the locks changed the next morning. She stood in the doorway of the apartment she was once exiled from, now empty, sunlit quiet, and took a long, steady breath. She didn't cry. She just whispered, and that was your lesson. It started with a laugh, a careless, sharp little laugh that didn't belong in a house that quiet. Michael had just come home from a long day at the office, longer than usual, because he'd taken a detour to the pharmacy. Diapers, wipes, a small bottle of baby colic drops. His back hurt. His shoulders ached. And in the silence of their apartment, he heard that laugh, soft, flirtatious, not meant for a husband. He moved quietly. The laugh wasn't from Ellie, not alone. It was from her phone on speaker. She was in the shower. The bathroom door steamed, but the phone, it sat unlocked on the kitchen island screen, still lit. He shouldn't have looked, but he did. The name read Liam G, followed by a series of heart emojis and a photo. A man half Michael's age, all muscle and tan lines. His throat tightened as he tapped the thread. Messages poured out in a stream of secrets and shame. Baby, I miss you already. Can't wait till he's out of the house again. You look so good this morning. And that thing you whispered got me thinking all day. Don't worry, he'll never know. You're too good at this. Photos, voice notes, a damn playlist. He felt like his lungs had been replaced by concrete. Michael staggered back like he'd been shot. And then he saw it. A date, a timeline, 9 months ago. A hotel receipt photo. A picture of Ellie barely clothed, wrapped around Liam. Michael sat down, the diaper bag slipping from his fingers. He wanted to vomit, to scream, but the baby monitor blinked, the sound of soft breathing. His daughter, was napping in the next room. The next day, he took the DNA test. He didn't tell Ellie. He couldn't even look at her. Everything felt fake, the way she smiled, the way she asked if he could grab milk, the way she called him babe, like nothing had happened. It took 3 days to get the results. 72 hours of walking like a ghost, pretending like the walls of his life weren't caving in. When the results came, he didn't open them right away. He waited until the house was empty, until Ellie had gone to the gym. To him, Michael thought bitterly. He sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey he hadn't touched in years. He opened the envelope and read it 3 times. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The glass slipped from his hand. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there for hours, until night bled into morning. 3 weeks passed. Michael didn't leave Ellie. Not yet. He didn't confront her. Not yet. He watched her, listened. He wanted to see just how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't just the infidelity. It was the fact that every kindness had been a lie. Every insult to his mother. Every accusation, every tear shed to gain his sympathy. It had all been a setup. And then one Friday afternoon, fate moved her pieces. Michael was invited to a real estate and investment seminar at the Hyatt downtown, a perk from his firm. He almost didn't go. He was too tired, too hollowed out. But something told him to. The room was packed. Suits, power skirts, espresso machines hissing in the back. He stood near the door scanning for a colleague when he heard a voice. Warm, polished, measured like the ticking of a well-made watch. And that's where most of us go wrong, the woman said on stage. We invest in things that look impressive but have no roots. Real strength isn't loud, it's calculated, quiet, and impossible to shake once it takes hold. Michael turned and dropped his coffee. It was her, his mother, Clara. But not the version he remembered. Not the frail, timid woman he turned his back on. Not the mother he let pack her life into 2 suitcases. This Clara was different. Hair swept into a sleek bun, pearl earrings, tailored black pantsuit, calm power radiating from her posture. She moved like someone who belonged. No trace of the woman who once begged to stay under his roof. Michael stood frozen as applause broke out. People approached her, eager to speak. She moved through them gracefully, confident, powerful. He didn't know why he followed her. But 20 minutes later, she was seated in a quiet corner of the hotel cafe, stirring her tea. I saw you, she said without looking up. Michael blinked. You knew, she nodded. From the moment you walked in. He sat across from her slowly. Awkward. Like a child called to the principal's office. I didn't expect to see you like this, he said finally. No, Clara said. You expected me to disappear. Silence. I didn't know what she was doing to you, he murmured. Yes, you did, Clara said softly, but not unkindly. You just chose not to look. Michael flinched. Then she slid something across the table, a manila envelope, inside a birth certificate, the DNA results. And then a thumb drive. What's this, he asked. Footage, Clara said. Of Ellie. With him. I had someone follow her. I wanted to be wrong, but I wasn't. Michael swallowed hard. He opened the folder, read every line, stared at the photos, listened to her voice on video calling him naive. His hands trembled. Clara reached across the table. I'm not here to punish you, she said. But you have a choice to make. Michael looked up. You can keep living as a man who lets people write his story for him. Or you can join me and finish this. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel lost. He felt ready. Michael left the hotel with the folder still clutched in his hands like it contained a beating heart. That night, he didn't go home. He parked in a dimly lit lot by the lake, stared out at the still water, and let the silence stretch. The videos of Ellie looped in his mind like a broken tape. Her laughing in another man's arms, calling him a fool, complaining about how boring Michael was, how she was trapped in a marriage she could manipulate. He didn't feel rage, not yet. What he felt was shame. Shame for not believing his mother. Shame for letting himself become so small in his own life. He had allowed Ellie to redefine his reality, to isolate him from the only woman who had ever truly loved him without condition. And for what? A lie in a beautiful dress. A performance that looked like a family but felt like a transaction. He rested his head against the steering wheel and whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry, Mom." And for once, it didn't feel too late. The next morning, Michael came home earlier than usual. Ellie was still asleep, hair-tousled blanket wrapped around her like armor. The baby monitor hummed softly. He stood there in the doorway and realized something terrifying. He didn't know who this woman was anymore. Or maybe he never really had. She woke with a stretch and a smile that looked rehearsed. "Morning, babe," she chirped. "Did you get the coffee?" He nodded, placing a cup on the nightstand, watching as she took a sip without ever really looking at him. That evening, he didn't confront her. He cooked dinner instead. He played the part, watched her every move. She had no idea the man across the table was no longer hers to play with. Over the next few days, Michael prepared. Clara helped him quietly, providing the name of her lawyer, a trusted investigator, and even offered to pay for the best custody attorney in the city. Not out of revenge, but because she had spent her entire life letting people walk over her, and she refused to let her son do the same. "I'm not just helping you, Michael," she said. "I'm helping that little girl." He nodded, eyes glassy. Ellie had no idea what was coming, but the cracks were beginning to show. She was spending more time out of the house, texting furiously, hiding her screen when he walked in. She became jumpy, paranoid, accusing Michael of being too quiet or acting weird. "I'm just tired," he replied with a flat smile. She bought it, because she thought she still held the leash. One evening, Michael left his phone unlocked on the coffee table intentionally, inside a fake message thread between him and a non-existent woman named Kara. He left the room for 10 minutes. When he returned, Ellie was pale. "You know," she said, voice trembling, "if there's something you want to talk about." "Yeah?" He smiled. "Why would I want to talk, Ellie? You taught me silence speaks louder." 2 days later, she snapped. "You're being so cold lately. Do you even care anymore?" Michael stared at her, measured and steady. "I care enough to let you unravel at your own pace." She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? But he just walked past her, kissed the baby on the forehead, and said nothing. That night, Ellie texted Liam. "He's starting to act strange. I think he knows. We need to be careful." She hit send, then gasped. The thread vanished. Her phone screen blinked. Message undelivered. And at that exact moment, the lights in the apartment flickered. Her world was beginning to collapse. The next day, Michael invited her to dinner. Nothing fancy, just the three of them. Candlelight, wine. Ellie wore her favorite red dress. She touched up her makeup, fixed her hair. She thought it was a peace offering, a second chance. But when she stepped into the dining room, she froze. On the table right next to the wine glasses was an envelope. Her name scrawled across the front in calm, deliberate handwriting. "What's this?" she asked, voice already shaking. Michael didn't answer. She opened it. Inside, the birth certificate with the DNA discrepancy marked in red. A timeline. Photos. The hotel receipt. A screenshot of her text. A printed copy of the email she sent Liam just 24 hours earlier. The silence that followed was volcanic. Michael, I can explain." "No," he said, standing. "You can confess. There's a difference." She stumbled back, pale as bone. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to trap me," he finished. "To erase my mother. To build your perfect little empire on lies." Tears welled. "I was scared." "So was she," Michael said. "The night you and I kicked her out. Do you remember what you told me, that I had to choose between my future and my past?" He stepped closer, voice quiet as thunder. "Well, I choose now. Ellie collapsed into the chair. Michael turned away. And for the first time in years, he felt like a man again. Not a puppet. Not a fool. Not a husband in name only. But a son who had found his spine. Michael made his choice. He no longer looked at his mother with the doubt of a wounded son, but with the clarity of a man who had finally opened his eyes. What Ellie had done wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated cruelty, and it was time the world saw it. With Clara's help, Michael hired a legal team. Not just any lawyers, they were experts in elder abuse, property fraud, and defamation. Clara handed them everything: the hidden footage Ellie herself had recorded, the texts where she coordinated lies, the doctor's records showing the bruises she claimed were accidents. But the final nail, the paternity test and the messages between Ellie and her lover, messages that exposed her intent to trap Michael into a marriage with a child that wasn't his. They filed suit. Charges of fraud, elder abuse, defamation, and emotional manipulation. Michael added a civil claim for damages. Clara didn't ask for $1 in return. Her name was never about money. It was about truth. Then the media got wind of it. A local reporter uncovered the court documents and broke the story. Social media influencers sued by mother-in-law and husband. After faking abuse, courtroom drama unfolds. It spread like wildfire. Ellie's brand deals were the first to go. Companies didn't want their logos tied to someone accused of elder abuse and lying about domestic trauma. Her curated image of a compassionate, empowered woman shattered like glass. The comments turned. Overnight, she became a villain in her own fairy tale. But what no one expected was what happened in court. On the second day of the trial, during a break, Ellie and her lover got into a screaming match in the courthouse lobby. A reporter caught every word. "You said you loved me," Ellie cried. "I said I loved your money," he spat. "You're just a paycheck with a baby that's not even mine." He walked out right there. Cameras followed. Ellie collapsed into a bench, mascara running down her cheeks, abandoned, exposed, and humiliated. The next week, the judge granted Michael full custody. Ellie lost the house. She lost her income. She lost her child. And online, a storm of outrage left no corner of her digital life untouched. Meanwhile, Michael moved back in with Clara. Not out of shame, not out of guilt, but because he was starting over on solid ground this time. They renovated a modest but warm home outside the city. Clara built a small consulting firm under her name, and Michael joined her. Mother and son, once separated by silence and deception, now partners in rebuilding what was nearly destroyed. On a quiet fall afternoon, the golden leaves whispering in the breeze, they sat side by side on the porch. The sun was low, the air crisp. Michael turned to her. "Mom, I'm sorry for not believing you, for everything." Clara didn't respond right away. She let the moment linger, then smiled softly, eyes gentle with something deeper than forgiveness. "It's okay," she said. "I always believed you'd come home." She reached for his hand, squeezed it. "You know," she added, her voice calm but steady, "people like Ellie think they win because they shout the loudest. But in the end, the ones who lose are the ones who forget what's truly worth holding on to." And in that quiet moment, under the warm hum of the setting sun, Michael leaned into his mother's shoulder. It wasn't just an embrace. It was a beginning, the last hug, but also the first of many new ones. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of strength, of silence, of second chances, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their worth. And if you have a story, even just a whisper of one, drop it in the comments. Thank you.